Okay, we're live. I hope everyone can hear me. Go ahead and type in your questions. I figured out the problem. I was using a stupid USB hub that didn't have enough throughput for a webcam. But anyway, small little issues you find out after setting up a new office. So, yeah, good to see everyone here. I'll just blast this out. We probably have about an hour and a half. So if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I'm just going to share the link with everyone. I think someone already did on the meetup. And as soon as I see a question, I'll answer. So 3 people in already. Hopefully more will join. Let's make sure to update all of these channels now. All right, resolve the cam. Choose. What is that noise? Is that the fridge?
Oh, so there's. It might be the venting system too.
No, I don't think so. It's a fridge. Sounds awful.
Yeah, it's ours.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to be in here to start, but.
Mhm.
Start putting in the reach room. I'll be right here. Maybe if there's more stuff, I won't do that as much.
Okay, no questions so far. Hopefully people see this. Let's see. Okay, great. Kurt. Oh, thanks for the. Good to see you, Kurt. Long time no see. I'll check out the meetup. Maybe we can see each other at one of the agile things in Vancouver this summer. Let's see. Kurt and I met. He was over from further town, I think 4 years ago now, something like that. Definitely pre-COVID. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind posting that here, that would be great. So if I don't see your question on the meetup, so for some reason, maybe it's in a different spot, maybe it's a comment. Go ahead and ask again if you could. Yeah, that agile meeting was kind of that meetup was a good place. I ended up sitting in one corner for the whole event, just having different topics about how event modeling changes the software development life cycle as we know it through the eyes of agile. So it was a kind of a nice event because I could get questions from all different perspectives on how event modeling changes issue tracking, planning, all the things you're used to. So anyway, yeah, thanks, Kurt, for joining. And if you can post that question again, I'm going to try and dig it out of these comments here, but I just don't see it. It's got a chat. I guess Meetup changed it a little bit. They have a chat. I'm not sure if it's the same as comments used to be, but that's okay. I'll figure it out. Okay, seems like the link is doing it. Sorry, formatting issues. Hey, no problem. It's without. Oh, yeah. So, good question. That comes up quite often. Is how do you allow user data to be scrubbed? So one of the issues with event sourcing is that your data lives on forever in the ledger because it's an additive only model. So the typical way to deal with that is to use locks. So yeah, revoking access to information to certain events. Let's say I registered to a website and I don't like their service after 2 or 3 years. I'd like to remove my account, like people are deleting their Facebook accounts or whatever. I want to make sure that nothing of my personal information that can be tied to identifying me can belong there. Like my pictures or phone numbers or anything I posted, you kind of want to have a way to lock that. So information that you want to delete should be in a deletable format, and you simply have a link in the events to that information. And then you, when you revoke it, those events, you have to have business logic, obviously, to handle that as you're trying to show a profile page of a deleted user. You should obviously have views that can handle events that point to nothing, or have been marked as inaccessible in a secondary system. So that's the basic way of doing things. The other ways are to actually scrub the event stream itself and delete those events, which is a little bit harder to do. I'm not sure what use cases that would be a better option in, but if that's the way you want to go, I'm not sure how that would end up being used. Yeah, so sustainability of the facility privacy by allowing users. So yeah. So I hope that answers it. I know there's a slight nuance to your question that's a little bit different. Yeah, so even usage captured, and it's kind of a gray area because how far can you ensure your privacy and of what data you may have certain issues with the fact that you interacted with others, and that's going to be a problem. Their reactions to what you posted are going to be there, and those people don't want their data scrubbed. So there's a limit to what you can scrub with these privacy things, especially if the impact of what you wrote or what you posted made others act or repost some of the things you did, etc. So that's something that's going to obviously keep coming up as we exercise the privacy laws more and more around the world in Europe and North America. So yeah. Yeah, so Mike comes up with another option, which is the tokenization, which is essentially just deleting keys or crypto shredding information, which means the events contain links to where the data lives, but they require keys to unlock that data, and you throw away the keys if that person's taken away that, which is essentially doing the same thing, although it's relying on the strength of the cryptography, and who knows how powerful computers will be 15 years from now, and what methods we can come up with ways to circumvent that. So yeah, the only way to truly do it is to delete, but crypto shredding is another one. So yeah. Hi Dev, good to see you again. I think you were here at the last AMA. Sorry everyone about the late start. This is a new setup, and as I mentioned in the comments, I was using the webcam through a USB hub, and it didn't support the throughput, so I was wondering why the camera is not working, and then I just plugged it directly in to one of the ports, and it works just fine. So I'm glad you can hear me as well. Yeah, Kurt also raises a good point here about read models and projecting over events. That obviously encapsulates that privacy model. So those read models would have to traverse and find that information, and they would have to contain the logic to deal with the fact that someone had scrubbed things. Of course, you can also be a lot more direct about it and have account deleted, an account deleted event where all relevant read models subscribe to it, and they just won't bother reading those things anymore. That won't be something that's going to be fetched. And I know with a lot of event sourcing implementations now, the indexing and what you index is really starting to mature. So that type of index of which accounts are no longer to be traversed is something to kind of explore as well. Oh, so Mike comes up with, he wasn't referring to crypto shredding. It's a different type of scheme where you're just swapping the actual ID so that the ID is lost, and then I guess you're not finding anything under the new ID. Okay. So tokenization specifically. Sure. Yeah. And I've done PCI compliance at Pay by Phone. So yeah, we went through the stuff, but it's been years. I'm sure that works just fine in removing information here too. So good point, Mike. Yeah, and so Kurt raises another point that with event modeling, if you need to show privacy concerns, an event model can show that their data is stored in a separate service that has these attributes. For example, anything to do with their profile or their posts or whatever can be shown as separate swim lanes that logically or even physically house that information in a separated manner. So that you know that there's a system in place that treats your information more carefully, etc., than the running of the service itself, would definitely go a long way. I really do want to have more open source projects use event modeling as a way of documenting what the system does. I think it's really worked well for all of our custom projects over the last 7 years. Going on to 8, we're in our 8th year. So coming back, I know a big problem in open source is coming back to something that's kind of been stale for a while, but then people want to pick it up, and kind of reverse engineering a legacy code base, and it's kind of clunky, and the maintainer's not there anymore. So how do you get up to speed in with something? I guess with the AI stuff, it'll be a little bit easier, but still, it's kind of an afterthought. With an event model, if we haven't worked on a project for a customer, and even if the same consultants aren't here, when we come back to a project 2-3 years down the road, we can pinpoint exactly where we need to make changes to add a feature or fix something that was found to not work, within the same day. There's no ramp up. So that's one of the nicest things about event modeling that we could have. But yeah, same with this, audit, and this goes into security in general. So our partner company, Forward Security, knows how we work every time that we've had security aspects that needed to be kind of at the forefront of what the client needed. It was really easy for them to walk the event model and see where the interactions with the system occurred, and they also got the context within which APIs were called. So that made the security work incredibly easy to do all the reassurances of which workflows were secure and which subsystems had which level of integrity checks from a security perspective. So yeah, we have more people here. So Fred, welcome. Thank you for your question here. When applying event sourcing into legacy systems that store states, I try to populate the event store with events representing stated store in a relational DB. Is that a good approach? Yeah, it's fine. There's no kind of best or one way to do it for legacy applications. Repeating what the legacy application is doing in an event sourced way is good. Obviously, the question is whether you do it at a very kind of ignorant level, just trying to be empirical about capturing all state changes, or whether you're going into the legacy code base and you see you kind of understand enough to insert some listeners in the actual logic itself, so that you can emit an event that's more representative with what the intention of the user was, rather than just a change data capture kind of delta event that shows, oh, this row used to be this, it's now this. Who knows why, but here it is. Later on, we'll make projections off of that kind of give us some insights, versus going into a login page and or a registration page, and instead of relying on the change data capture differences in tables, you capture that input and say, okay, let it do whatever it needs in the legacy system. But at this point, I'm also going to put in a hook that's kind of a callback or whatever in the middle of this code. As soon as that form is submitted, I know that this person tried to register, and this my sidecar system, the new system, is also going to record that as an event with the raw data here. I'll make my own IDs, manage them, maybe even map them to what's in the old system at some point. That's the better way if you can do it. I think you can, for any system, start to move in those ways. And if you've read Working Effectively with Legacy Code by Michael Feathers, he goes into how important that is to have testing around that. So this kind of goes into your understanding of how the legacy system works, is how well you can place tests around parts of the logic. But that also applies to, if you can place tests around, it means you understand enough. That kind of has a side effect of being able to then talk about what it is that the system does, and allows you to then publish that information as events, and carry that testing regimen to its full benefits by being able to publish data about itself. And now you get more business-like events. That's a truer representation of the system, and it's a great exercise anyway, to do. Maybe find some legacy code, reverse engineer it with event modeling, find all of the different screens you're going through, maybe do a difference between backups on the database after each change that you make. And obviously there's tools for databases that allow you to kind of have a timeline. You can move the slider forward to see which tables changed after you took some actions. That might get you more information as to what's kind of implicitly baked into the legacy system. And you can probably differentiate, oh, look, I registered. I think I did this last year or 2 years ago in the meetup, where we looked at CRM system that was a legacy system. And yeah, I registered as a user or something like that, and I put down this information. So I have an event that I know happened with the information that I provided. But then when you do the difference in the database, I saw that there was a table also for like inserting a default a default row for like credit checks or something, so that by default there's like this idea that this person doesn't have a good credit history because they haven't gone through a credit check or whatever else the system kind of preps. So you can, that's a really useful exercise to kind of understand what the intentions are of a system versus what the user sees, because the user will probably not see that, oh, and by the way, we also inserted a default credit score for you. They probably won't show that on the confirmation page, but the system did do that. And so I guess that's the difference. A lot of people that are looking at event modeling, it's like, oh, that's just glorified wireframes. It isn't. It's yes, it has the UI component, which is very important, but it also does that audit of what's going on underneath to understand all of the changes in the system as the system gets used, and make those implicit changes explicit in that storyboard. So it's good to see that the chat is going and people are helping each other out. So Mike and Kurt are talking, which is good. And hopefully my little diversion here with the legacy code gave you guys some more ideas on how to deal with that. So Fred, let me know if that makes sense. And obviously, I'm happy to jump in on real world examples. So if you have a legacy code base, or just find some open source thing that's kind of fallen out of favor, I always meant to go deeper into that, but it just takes a lot of time. Maybe with all the AI stuff and ChatGPT and CodePilot, we could go through things a lot more quickly to get to the point of showing the concepts instead of wrestling with syntax, which is often what happens with legacy projects. You're dealing with setting up environments and whatever worked 5 years ago or whatnot, and outdated libraries. So handling all that with the help of AI would be a lot easier, and we can jump into the fun stuff like all the things I just said. So yeah, Fred, hopefully that makes sense, and happy to chat about that more in the future. So I'd also suggest that Fred, if you want to post that as a topic in the Slack channel for event modeling. If you go to the event modeling website, on the resources page, there's a Slack link. You can click on that and join that community. There's usually a few discussions every week that kind of get started, and people follow up in threads. It's also a good way to get a hold of me if you have a specific question, besides Twitter and other places. So that's one way to continue that subject. It's a good one, and I think it's going to be a lot easier to do with the ChatGPT stuff, especially since legacy stuff is going to be part of that training set for these AI large language models. So if you want to revive 3-year-old, 5-year-old open source project, I think the AI stuff's going to be a tremendous help, because that syntax was part of the learning set for all of that, which would be pretty cool. So Dev says, I'm looking forward to the Twitter space. So I'm not sure what that means. Is there yeah, right. I think Elon was doing buying 1,000 GPUs or something for that. So I think I tweeted about that too, that it would be good to actually have some bots on Twitter available, which would be kind of neat for different purposes. Maybe he'll do something useful with that. Hopefully it won't be turned into some stupid political bot army, but actually fill Twitter space with useful things instead of these popularity contests and political stuff. So one can hope. And then, of course, if we have sometimes there's good stuff that comes up. I mean, look at all the ChatGPT stuff that's coming out of the evil monster of Microsoft, right? So they're sponsoring a lot of that. So good. And So I was going to make one more point about the Chat GPT stuff because it's quite useful. Oh yeah, so Dev's talking about the EDA space that you're invited to. Oh yeah, right. Okay, yes, that's right, Dev. Thank you. I remember that. I remember DMing with you about that, and I think you added Derek Cameron there as well, who's a fellow Canadian on the other side of the country that does a lot of the event sourcing stuff too. He's got a good YouTube channel and all that. Always good to see that he's putting out good information. But yeah, so yeah, if you can follow up with me on Twitter to see if you want to do something, happy to do that. Okay, and Mike says, as I mentioned some time ago, so we're moving to Postgres and Event Store rather than Event Store. How's that going? Any plans to open source? Yeah, so the plans are still to open source a lot of things. We are, again, careful not to open source things that will open up way more maintenance and people complaining about, not enough support. A lot of the stuff in our own stack is just stuck in our own heads still. So there's this kind of big issue with open sourcing things without the proper level of support. People kind of hate open source projects with, not all the readmes and tutorials ready and kind of shifting foundation underneath them as we push out more things. But yeah, certainly is in the works. That hasn't changed. Moving to Postgres, again, is still something that we'll be moving forward with. I think a lot of the work that we do is kicked off by projects for clients. So as soon as that need arises when someone's wanting to go to AWS and they don't want to have an event store, the what's it called, the cloud native event store there. They just want to rely on traditional tables. That's when we'll make a jump. It shouldn't be too hard. I mean, the layer of abstraction there for getting events and ordered stream and like an ordered stream of events shouldn't be too hard with that. With Postgres, there's a lot of other projects that already use Postgres for event sourcing. We're going to be looking at Evently from Matt Bishop. That's kind of wrote some indexing around and kind of globalization of event streams using Postgres. We just probably will use the part of the API that writes the events and all that. We don't want to throw in the extra features, at least not right off the bat. As soon as that kind of global way of accessing data for different geographic regions becomes a necessity for some of our clients, we'll pull those in. But at the core, we can just look at individual Postgres instances dealing with services or splitting them geographically and manually dealing with propagating them if we need. So yeah, definitely look for that in the future, but it's definitely going to be kicked off by some commercial projects that we do. And if clients just, some clients just won't, that's our lesson from long ago, is that the total cost of ownership of having to host yet another type of database was always was an issue for companies because it implied higher maintenance, and more moving parts. So yeah, getting rid of that for the clients that don't want it will be a good thing. Just haven't had anyone ask for it yet, but I'm sure it's right around the corner. So yeah. So the moving to Postgres, there's no technical advantages. I think there's some technical disadvantages. Event Store is made to be way more performant for write heavy stuff. But like I said in the previous AMAs, we've never even come close to that limit in terms of the solutions that we put together. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think the costs for understanding, maintaining, and having yet another vendor in your mix of services, that cost is way higher than then scaling up Postgres so that it can catch up with those similar SLAs. So that's the motivation for Postgres. Is it's just a lower barrier to entry for event sourcing. And again, one of the reasons we went with Event Store at the beginning is to create a motivation to do event sourcing properly, so that you are adding event sourcing because you have an event sourcing technology in there to be used. But now, as we've moved forward, and a lot of companies that are forward thinking, they don't want to delete data. They know that approaches like history tables and or just trying to rely on backups, that's not good enough for having a ledger of how you got to a certain state, and also to enable future features you don't know you need yet, all sorts of things. Those are free and actually are easier. People that say event sourcing is harder is absolute crap. It's the easiest thing because it supports so few patterns, and the traditional stuff actually supports so many patterns that that it's actually a harder approach. So whenever someone says, "Oh, event sourcing is hard," it's a complete lie. With event sourcing, everything's a projection. You have basically two patterns of how you change state by adding things to the ledger, and then how you make sense of what's already on the ledger. And those are very small amount of patterns to keep repeating. And so event sourcing is way easier if you look at it without this baby duck syndrome, or being familiar with traditional ways. Let's get back to a few more questions. So sorry about this session was a little bit late. We still have about an hour, so hopefully we'll get through everything. But I'm glad you're asking questions. Oh, David Sinclair, good to see you here. Do enjoy your interactions on Twitter, so thank you for being here. Oh, that's a very concrete question. So if you have a scenario where a user is entering information for an email that the system will send for them, what would you name the event? Send email requested with a send email succeeded, etc. Yeah, that makes sense. It's really, there are no hard and fast rules about these. You kind of want to, depending on how email sending centric your service is, you may tend to elaborate these things. Like in our Plenty of Fish dating site messaging application was a good example. Send message seems pretty easy in any other system, but sending a message on a publicly open dating site has a lot of problems that you need to solve, for spam, for other abuses, and all privacy issues and all sorts of things. So that ended up having a set of events and commands that was not trivial. There was probably maybe 12 or 30 of those, something like that, non-trivial amount to get a message sent on that platform. So, when you say scenario where user is entering information for an email that the system will send for them, well, that depends on, whether this is just a typical send email thing, or whether it's more central to your business and has more nuance. Then obviously you would work a little bit harder on naming that. But what you said there should be just fine. And yeah, your automatic process that kicks off to send these emails for people, as it does it, it marks them with subsequent events that say email was sent. That sounds perfectly reasonable to me. Not sure what other complications might come up, but yeah, on the surface it seems okay. Good. Well, that was a good set of questions to start. I might dig into a bit of the history on Twitter for the last couple of months here to see if there's any topics that also we dealt with here at the company, or I talked about personally, because it's been quite a while since I did the AMA. I think this is the first time that I'm doing that from this new little Nook computer, which is really good. I've had nothing but praise for these little computers. They've replaced the need for me to lug a laptop around. I still take it to client meetings and all that, but to just sit down at your desk and the small computer is quite powerful, out of the way, lots of space for your keyboard and stuff. So, so the project that we're open sourcing, there's two. I mean, there probably will be more that are kind of maybe a client that no longer needs a service that we can just open source an entire solution. But the project that I want to open source is really how we kind of run the company. So if you remember the GitHub handbook or the Valve handbook, kind of like how the Spotify model, how these companies successfully run, you can kind of take their playbook and kind of apply it to your own company. We want to do the same thing, and part of that is really about how how do you run a company that needs to charge out to multiple clients. It's a consultancy, it's an outsourcing shop, but they also work on fixed costs with event sourcing, and there's a different way that you would do CI/CD, where you're pushing out parts of the workflow instead of components. At some level, it's a little bit different how you think about the solution. So how you do billing and time tracking and work tracking. Really, it's about work activity, because with fixed costs, you kind of don't want to per se track hours. People just track whether they finished a particular piece of the event model, and once it's finished, then they get paid for it, and they also have to support it and fix any bugs for free on there. So it's kind of begging to be really automated. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about with CI/CD is that we want to have a system that automatically pushes whatever is ready to a demo site, so the client can see that the features are working, they can exercise them, but tie it into Stripe. When someone actually pays for that work, then that set of features and the parts of the workflow actually get pushed to production at that time. So it's kind of like a hands-off system for really moving everything to an automated way, and less management. We deal with a lot of clients, so that starts to become kind of a headache, dealing with all the invoicing and trying to get away from all the bespoke stuff. But if you event source that, so currently I'm working on I have a reporting side of it done. I want to open source that. And of course, the data entry part, which would be kind of automated as well. You could hook it up to a repository. So when a command handler is finished and that slice is finished and it's pushed and it's integrated into a QA branch, that should automatically map to that user, and then mark that as a billable item in their stream. And then when the invoice is generated for the client, that piece is one of the items that's billed. And of course, at the end of the month for that consultant, there's an automatic invoice that's generated from the work that that was basically put into those events. So you can imagine this stream of events for running a consultancy like this would be kind of interesting. And I do want to change the way the industry works to be more fixed cost based, like what we do. I think it's a lot easier with event sourcing to do that, and with event modeling, making design something that's not onerous and can be done quickly and used throughout the project. We can show that any company can change to that way of working. So having an actual open source project that enables that would be great. And one thing I was going to add is that I want to have that as a Nextcloud plugin. So Nextcloud is a replacement for Google Suite and all those things that you get out of paid platforms. So we host our own Nextcloud, which has which stores our document sharing and can do video conferencing and everything that you would do with Google except email. It's the only thing it doesn't do. And it has a plugin model or add-ins or whatever, where I could easily add to people's activity sheets. So we kind of do event sourcing for activity tracking, which is every time someone finishes a piece of work, there's an event that's essentially represented by another tab delimited entry in a file, and we finish these files every month. And so then we kind of apply event sourcing to these entries to make reports on what to put on invoices, etc. But with Nextcloud, we could have a plugin that basically allows you to go to a web page that would manipulate these files underneath to append them, give reports, basically have a hosted site. And at the same time, for people without Nextcloud, just to have a regular Node Express application they could host very easily in a Docker container locally, and manipulate those files for themselves. And if they want to share that with another synchronization technology like Google Drive or something, that should work just fine, because that's all we really do here is people share their activity files with me on Nextcloud, and I have a folder with all the consultants' activity folders, and I run scripts and other tools to just quickly look at what was done. That's how the invoices are generated, and that's how I cross-reference whether the invoices that the consultants give me actually represent the work that was done. So there's a lot of cross-referencing there, but there's a single source of truth of what actually happened, what people wrote, what contracts were written, what statements of work were done. That's all accounting-like, and event sourcing is perfect for accounting systems. And so I think that would be a really good open source project for everyone to kind of look at. Even though you're not working like that, you could maybe use it for your own time tracking at least, and generating invoices for your own clients if you're a consultant, or if you're working somewhere you just want to be more disciplined about tracking your work, then you could use that as well. So you could certainly use parts of that project for whatever your purposes are as you're working on projects. So yeah. So the book always gets asked about. I'm trying to constantly find time to finish it. So I'm hoping that it's going to be this year at some point, hopefully by the end of summer. But yeah, running a business and and doing all these things does take a lot of time away. There's travel as well. I'll be in Europe soon for the Colo Camp in Austria. So if you're I think it's called Colo Camp, but anyway, it's a collaborative, people that are doing collaborative approaches. So yeah, Como Camp. So that's what it's called, Como Camp, and that's in Vienna at the beginning of May. So I'll be in Europe. If you're, I put out a message that if you have something to that you need help with, either holding an event modeling session for your company, or you want your community to sponsor something. Maybe you have a few companies that can sponsor me coming out there and doing 1 or 2 days in your city. Europe is pretty fast to get like a flight to a different city. So as long as I'm there, something like May 8th on would be kind of workable, and we could do live event modeling and talk about event sourcing in person, and kind of share with how we built systems over all these years using this. If you're trying to switch to event-driven architectures, that would be a good time to do that as well. So I guess I'm in Europe at least a couple of times a year, sometimes because of a little conference that happens. So that would be an opportunity. So reach out to me if you want to do something in your city. I don't mind taking another flight somewhere, and if you want help talking to different companies in your city about sponsorship, I can sort of give them an idea of what that would look like, and we can make it attractive for them by live streaming some of the stuff and featuring them on as the sponsors and things like that. So if they're having trouble hiring, we could help them out, especially if they're doing event-driven stuff. It'll put them on the map. So let me know if you're interested. Yeah. Peter Gordon, nice to see you. And yeah, so the book, David is really up to my free time, and I'm trying to be way more active and or proactive in terms of carving that out. But it's been a difficult last 6 months with a lot of things happening, new office, and a lot of things in flux. So everything you see behind me is part of the new office, and just like I said, even the tech stuff here is is new. So setting up everything from scratch was fun. I'm I'm in talks, been in talks with so about who's going to be publishing this. I've been in talks with a couple of people. I think O'Reilly reached out, or someone from O'Reilly reached out, so it could be an animal book for this. Um, um, there's also, but from Von Vernon's series, he's interested in doing that. I still owe him the chapter outlines. But Addison Wesley for sure, and Von Vernon's series is another option. I think that might be the best one because I've seen like 2 or 3 books get published quite quickly. I know the domain storytelling one, or maybe another one that was published by the guys that are going to be at the Como camp. That book got put out quite quickly last year or the year before. So from all the things that I hear about delays in dealing with publishers, I think the way Von's series runs is like clockwork. He's got a really good system there and knows the people there and has been successfully publishing them. So probably my priority would be to push that through with Von in his series. Yeah, but otherwise, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't. My hope is that it does. It could be just a lean pub thing, and then I just have to be careful with the rights and copyrights and what I do, and if I can republish similar content for a hardcover, it probably will be with O'Reilly or Addison Wesley. To make a long answer shorter, is I don't have a specific publisher that's kind of solidified yet, but that will need to be answered soon, as soon as all the content's out. And I guess you start talking to publishers once you have an outline and a table of contents and an idea of how big it's going to be. Then you can start to engage with their editors and send them chapters. I always like the Head First Patterns books. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they're quite fun and interactive. They actually make dry topics a lot more accessible. So I think the style in which I'm going to be writing is that. And also I've always said that Michael Feather's Legacy book has a really good format that worked for me, and why that book is in a lot of people's desks. It has the concepts written at the very beginning for the first third of the book, understanding why testing is important, how you implement these things, and then the last 2/3 of the book is a reference guide of all the patterns. And in event modeling over the last 8, well, I guess if you call it specifically event modeling, it's since 2018, but we can find so many patterns, larger patterns that are or problems that are solved, and the solution blueprints, that we could have a reference in the event modeling book for, like, oh, this is how you do sign up. This is a typical payment, workflow shown as an event model. You could basically have a really nice reference guide that would be really applicable to any project, and then that should be kind of a book that's on people's desks, whether you're a product owner or whether you're a developer. You should have that book there. I don't want to release a book that people are not going to keep as a reference. So that's why I bring up Michael Feather's book, because it ended up being, a good reference guide for a lot of legacy systems that needed to be put under test. In the same way, I kind of want event modeling to be a version of that book, with a big chunk of it also to deal, how do you deal with traditional systems, reverse engineering what you inherited, and how you quickly use event modeling to understand it better and use that notation to refer back to how things work in a solution that's kind of been abandoned or is considered legacy code as well. A lot of us deal with that, so it's going to be a big part of the book for sure. And I think having recipes and things to follow that are proven and that we've done in the real world is going to be something that makes it a book that people will trust to guide them and will use as a reference. I'm not interested in things that are just going to be read once and tossed aside. I want things to be usable and to help people in their career, and that's certainly what the legacy code book did for me. Dealing with those things, but learning about modern ways of unit testing and all of that was kind of the real value of that book, even though it was called legacy codes. You learned a lot about unit tests and agile and other things through it. So Head First books I really liked. Finally a publisher that kind of took the dryness out of the topics, because I remember reading all of the traditional software architecture books, and it was pretty I enjoyed it because I'm a technical geek, but I can see how others would be discouraged. And then when I picked up the Head First Patterns books, it was way more engaging and fun, and and a lot of illustrations, like nice fun illustrations. I like comic books and comic strips and all that, and I like to draw, and so that also totally spoke to me too, so it was fun. So let's see, publisher. I do have a channel as soon as I have some content, I'm going to start to share a lot of the excerpts on the chapters or talk about the chapters. I did make a book channel on the event modeling Slack. So if you go to the event modeling website, on the resources page, there's a Slack link. If you haven't joined the Slack channel, you can there. And again, I want to really move that to Discord at some point. So we'll see if that when that happens, because Slack is horrible for erasing old messages and all that. Trying to see if one thing that I wanted to do, maybe with ChatGPT, it's a little bit easier, but I wanted to have an archive of messages in that Slack channel. Might be easier to do with Discord. Essentially just capture topics that were talked about as a series of archive pages that are just on the event modeling site. The event modeling site's not WordPress or anything. It's static. It's a static site generated by Hugo, but we could definitely have something that automates nightly backups of all the messages and just publishes them as pages onto the event modeling site, like just so it can be indexed and people can find different topics being talked about there. Because Slack is just like a empty void you're throwing all that information into. It's all locked down. So anyway, ideas. Time. There's only so many hours in the day. There's so many things we could do. The Head First. So there's a couple of publishers or styles of writing that really I liked in what I did. And so, like David said here in the chat, the Head First is a different perspective. It's more fun. I think the reference style that Michael Feathers has makes a book a lot more usable and applicable, and people will want to keep it around and pass it on to colleagues. And so those are my motivations for the format and type of book that I want it to be. I see David's joined the Slack. I'm getting a little notification. So good to see you on there, David. Any other questions? I'm gonna try and round this out. We got another half hour maybe. Don't want it to go too long if there's no other questions. So I'm gonna start looking at things that I might have talked about in the last couple of weeks to see if it jogs my memory about what we talk about. Certainly been working a lot more with the AI stuff. That's always going to be interesting. Oh, one thing I did do is ChatGPT is quite good at creating formats. And one of the things that we've been struggling with, not struggling, just didn't have time to really work on it, is a proper uh, standard markup language for event modeling. And surprisingly, ChatGPT is really good at it. So I've kind of described an event model and then asked ChatGPT to say, make a YAML like notation for this solution. It's a little bit clumsy. Like it still has a problem with understanding that there's a timeline. Like this whole idea of time moving forward in a graphical representation. This, I just haven't figured out how to address the language model for it to really pin that down. And I'm trying to see if there's a lot of work in other areas like wireframes, etc., to start that AI engine talking about a left to right by example as being kind of the cornerstone of what the idea is. And then once that is kind of um, not understood, but the prompts get it down the right path in the model, then we can start to ask for a notation that's going to be interesting. So I had some interesting little results. And I also went backwards. Once it made that notation, I then asked for it to make an SVG of a diagram of an event model. But again, it didn't get the horizontal nature of progression of time on it, but it looks very promising. And I'm sure that it won't be a problem with the next version of ChatGPT. But fun to see just how much you can leverage of the training model of what's out there to do these things on. So um, yeah, I mean, right now we can easily start to generate code quite quickly to make command handlers and read models. That I'm already taking advantage of, even for this open source project that's been mostly for the time tracking. That's been mostly ChatGPT work. And of course, since I don't like PHP, or well, I shouldn't say that. I know that people hate PHP, and haven't had enough experience with PHP, but that's what Nextcloud is written on, and so the add-ins for it are to be written in PHP. And now that I can have that written by AI, it's less of an issue. So this whole thing about polyglot programming is going to be bigger and bigger as we move through the next couple of years. Is that, oh, well, I really don't care that Nextcloud has plugins written in PHP. I can write it in whatever language I want, even make a pseudo language myself, and just have it project into a PHP solution and that I plug in, and I don't care. Or I can bring another plugin from another solution, like in WordPress, or well, that's a bad example because that's PHP as well. But anyway, some other framework where I have a nice add-in that I want to use in Nextcloud, I can use the AI thing to just give me a translation into PHP and plunk it in. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah. So Mike, great question. Yeah. What's the format notation that would fit best? I don't know if you watch the Firebase guy, not Firebase, what's it called? Firecode on YouTube, but he's been dealing with a lot of this impact of ChatGPT on how we work as software developers. And he did like one of the best ones was just written out in plain English, like a cooking recipe was the best format. So maybe cooking recipes are better understood by these language models, and that's why that notation seems to be better. But I know people hate YAML, TOML. They're always whining and complaining about it. So I don't know what the best is. People will complain about any kind of standard that you put out there because it's difficult to use in something that they've worked with before. I'm not really, for that reason, I'm not really highly opinionated of what it is, as long as it's it's what captures kind of the spirit of how event models are written and maintained, um, whether the notation is going to be in the way or not. So if you have suggestions of what you want to use, I know there's some open source projects. I think someone did a plant UML thing that worked for event modeling, but they had to add some extensions to it because, again, a horizontal timeline wasn't well supported. I think the only thing that Plant UML did have is support for sequence diagrams, but it's a vertical timeline. So there may be a translation layer. It's just like you make the event model sideways in terms of using Plant UML, and then you have a conversion that flips it on its side after. So I don't know. That's what I've seen. But it's definitely something that maybe there's the whole cooking recipe format is not such a bad idea, since really it's language that articulates best what an event model is expressing. And so maybe we shouldn't be digging into YAML and TOML and all these things as much as having tokens in a regular kind of write up and just leverage language itself. I don't know. That's some of the things that we've grown so used to are really disappearing right in front of our eyes because of just the level of automation that these models give. And it's kind of what we've been saying, like why event modeling and event sourcing works for us is that it's the same thing over and over again. How many more systems for insurance companies or point of sale systems are we going to have? It's the same thing over and over again. So of course there's going to be a large body of work for the business logic that's in these things. And yeah, it doesn't have to be a brand new project for every single thing you do. It's not that exciting. It's these boring, simple steps. So we're going to have very little need to write them manually. They've already been written 1,000 times over. And so, yeah, that's the future. Just gonna jump up on another level. Opinion on async API? I don't have an opinion. I haven't actually had a chance to really work with it. I'm going to look it up now, since that's what you're talking about. It would be good to see. Oh, okay, for events-driven stuff. Oh, interesting. Yeah, maybe. I don't know if you can think. I guess parts of the event model are APIs. I guess your commands and read models are. I like it. Yeah, I mean that looks like YAML. So yeah, it is YAML. And I think what ChatGPT gave me was a similar thing where at first it described all the events at the top part of the document and the commands, and then I kept bugging it because it didn't have certain things, like I need example data. So it was really stubborn about wanting to make up example data for the notation. That's a big thing with event modeling, is using example data, and it was really difficult to make it do anything about the screens. It would just really leave the screens as a white box with a description of the name of that. It wouldn't go into the fact that it had certain fields displayed on that screen. And again, this is just my first foray into being a quote unquote prompt engineer. So maybe I'm just not prompting it right. at this point. Maybe it's something we can play around with next time at the next AMA, is just to kind of share a screen of how we can leverage what's out there already in that large model, what already exists for all the different notations for plant UML and others, and see if we can bend that stuff to work for us here. But yeah, if you have tried it and you get something, let me know. There is a let me see if I can find a Fireship video that I watched, because it has that. It was a recent one. I'll post a link for you guys. And I think near the end is where he starts to talk about this representation. The pseudocode is better than writing React or whatever. Then you can project your pseudocode to anything. Well, that's exactly what event modeling is. So, yeah. I do have, I can post those if you want. I can post my prompts. I'll probably do it on Twitter. I got the Twitter blue thing so I can have longer messages. So I could post the complete prompts in there, and a big chunk of the results too, if you want. Yeah, at least it'll give you an idea of where I was going and the phrasing that I was using. Fireship, I think this is the one here. Yep. I think this is the video. Yeah, translate to any language. So yeah, around the 5-minute mark is in this video is where it starts to talk about that. So I'll just post it in the chat. At the 5-min mark is where. So yeah, if you look in the chat, you'll see that it gets to that interesting point at around 5 minutes in. But don't, look at it later if you want. Yeah, lots of cool things in the near future. I know that all the open source things that we wanted to do are way more easily attainable now. Things that I was going to spend a week on, it's something that I just can find an afternoon for. So yeah, this year was going to be quite good. All the things that I've wanted to do, including writing the book, are going to be unlocked by just how much more accessible that body of work of previous, programming and contribution is available through these language models. People that are poo-pooing this just have no idea what they're talking about. When you shrink down 4 hours of Stack Overflow surfing to 5 minutes, that's an order of magnitude leap. Mix that in with entire system descriptions with event modeling, you're on a different level. So it's going to be a crazy year. What else did I talk about here? Yeah, some people say that they only use event modeling for certain things. We use event modeling from beginning to end. We use it for every single thing. We don't leverage anything like Jira or anything like that. That was another thing that came up. Seems like a bit extremist, but honestly, it's not that extreme when you think about it. When you start to collaborate with people, you want the simplest communication mechanism back and forth. You don't want to have 12 different places where that information is distributed. So event modeling for us is what made communication easier. And that's why we push only using the event model so that it gets exercised and keeps up to date, etc. The minute you start to introduce other notations because they might be better in a certain aspect to get something explained better. But while that may be true, it's not something that's a free benefit. It has the cost of distributing information into multiple places, and you're losing the collaboration aspect, and all roles looking at one documentation. So, but yeah, there are people that are making their own tools for certain aspects of the software development lifecycle, and they'll continue to say that event modeling is not for everything. But we're here to prove that it is, and the business side of it has proven that to be true, with millions of dollars in different projects standing behind it. So, how do you replace it? How do you replace Jira? Well, what does Jira tell you? It tells you what's been done, what's left to do, which areas have problems. So in those respects, we color slices green as having been done, yellow as in progress. We have comments on the event model to show any issues in terms of clarity. And so that's how we work off of an event model. So there's no need for issue trackers. Issue trackers, first of all, are abused because issue trackers were bug trackers. That's how they were started. They were backlogs of things that are deficient in the system that came in from feedback from your customers, and then that got filtered through your customer support, and then got bubbled up and organized to what's going to get fixed in your tech side. And so yeah, there's still a room for issue trackers, bug trackers, and that's exactly what they're designed for, is to track those bugs. But in terms of us building systems and maintaining them, the event model is the only thing we've needed. Just communicate on there, comments, whatever. You're always looking at the solution. You're always improving the solution. You're making sure that the documentation, the event model itself, continues to be in sync with what reality is. And the minute you start to sprinkle that across multiple places, it's harder to keep 12 artifacts in sync about the solution than it is to keep one artifact in sync with the solution. So currently, we're not tied to any specific tool, but most companies are using Miro, so that's what we default to. I would like that not to be the case, but unfortunately, that's where we are. They're expensive. I think I pay something like $1,200 or $1,500 a year for all the licensing that I need for that. So it's not cheap. I'd rather use others, but unfortunately, that cost has to be built into our pricing because that's what people choose to use. So maybe as soon as ONote and others are more mature, then we start to push that and find ways to migrate things out of Miro. So there's also an interesting set of open source projects that could be started as Miro plugins, where you can extract information from that. So if you can imagine an event model on a Miro board, you could run some code to automatically recognize, oh, this is a swim lane for the user, the UI pieces. Here are the events. Here are the state views, and here are the commands. You could start to glean a lot of information, especially things like burn down charts, because you know which slices have a background color of green. That means they're done. And the ones that haven't been done are just white. And so that should be something that's free, that comes out, like, to your point, Kurt, how does it change, Jira and all of that use of Jira. You could write a Miro plugin that would simply interrogate the shapes on the Miro board and say, which of these pieces are filled in and which ones aren't. And then just automate that and show a burn down chart week by week of how much has been done. I think I've done a little bit of that Miro automation, and Rob here has also done that in Python for a little bit of that. We used to run some reports of progress from that. We didn't really rely on the kind of coordinates of the components, but we embedded that into the names of the actual slices. So like if there was a command handler, we would have some brackets after, oh, Tim was working on this and it's in progress or it's done. And then on Miro, you can easily just export the whole thing as a CSV, which it really isn't. It's just taking the text out of every single box and putting it in a giant text file. But we could just parse that to get the brackets out and the text in there and say that, oh, these things are done, these things are in progress, and these things are left to be done. And so you could generate a whole list of the pieces that are still outstanding, who's working on them, and which ones are done. You could just keep sending that to the client to see how fast things are progressing. Oh, hi, Dennis. Nice to see you. It's a little bit. I was late anyway, so it's good that people are showing up. Nice to see people show up. But yeah, so if there's any other questions, fire away. I'm just looking through my timeline to see what topics I covered over the last few months. If there's something else that jogs my mind to share with you guys, I will. And probably have another 10 minutes. So if you have questions, fire away. I'll interrupt my train of thought here for you. Yeah, the feature branching stuff also came up, as it always does, because we have this horrible mindset that trunk-based is best, and keep trying to push people to ship incomplete code to production, which is just really stupid in my opinion, but whatever. Yeah, I kind of talked about a little bit of the Twitter buying a whole bunch of GPUs, but that's kind of a side note. Hopefully not. Let's see. Yeah, the whole Chat GPT has been a big distraction for a lot of people from what they're working on. So we're not immune. And if you've worked with Nextcloud, I want to work on this stuff with me, let me know. I think it would be really cool to have that as a complete package for people that want to automate their business, that they can just drop in Nextcloud and it has a plugin for running the business in it right away, with the state being stored in plain text files that are just events of who finished what slice and all that, and then of course have it hooked up to whatever source control system you're using to automatically insert those for you, automatically generate invoices to clients. I think it'll be really cool. Oh, Dennis has an interesting question. So let me read it out for those listening. Using EMES, event modeling, and event sourcing to synchronize e-commerce JSON payloads from public open host service and store the diffs in our as our ES fact store, homebrew CDC. Am I going down the wrong rabbit hole? No, I think you're doing things just fine. I think you may want to refine that as you actually understand more, or if you have a capability to see what generates those payloads and hook in a little bit further upstream to gather, to kind of get the business intention that's happening. But this is like typical, this is by the book CDC, change data capture, which is just looking at, how do these things change? And you have kind of a very plain representation of what's happening, with a lot of the reasons as to why it changed missing, but it's a starting point of actually being accountable for knowing every change. Yeah, no, exactly. So you can start to reverse engineer those. Exactly right, and that may be done via certain read models that will give you an insight. Oh, these sets of changes always mean that this happened, and then you might have just a read model that, or a state view that gives you a list of better worded and better understood set of events. The example I give of the hotel, in the hotel system, is these really low level events of geolocation of the person's phone, and then when they exit the hotel, they're kind of leaving this rectangle on the map, and when they do that, they get their bill sent to them, or whatever, their invoice for staying at the hotel. So the actual events of updates of their position is this kind of low level dumb events, but then you project them into another set of events, like enter the hotel area, left hotel area, right? You're no longer looking at coordinates on GPS coordinates, but you're looking at facts of that we understand and how we talk about this person left the hotel or this person entered the hotel again. Oh, so how would you event model? Yeah, anytime you have a translation, it always goes to a green read model up to a processor, back to a blue command, and then into a new event. So sometimes people short circuit that for notation, but essentially what you want to have is a green box that says, okay, I understand. I can make these projections off of that. It may just be a list of events that I have to republish in that green box. And then the processor is very dumb. It just reads that list and shoves each of the events from the green box into, hey, publish this event in this other system. And then that event just gets unwrapped and it shows up in another swim lane. That's kind of a no-op kind of way of showing it. But it does capture the fact that you are not really translating it any further after you make that initial green box from those raw events. And the rest is just no ops, just pushing the data all the way through to the other side as a orange event in the other stream, which has more meaning. Yeah, any of these short circuits of saying this event or these sets of events ends up as this event in another stream, you can always extrapolate to that same pattern of events go to green box, a processor, and the processor gives blue boxes, which then end up being stored as these other events on the other side. So, and I just like to do that because I need consistency in an event model. I want people to understand the pattern, and that the patterns are responsible for any state transitions, and make them simple and repeatable. And yeah, like with anything, a set of small patterns makes up a larger pattern. You can call something, even at a higher level, I can say that this port, like we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I can say, here's a recipe for a sign-in, and I can see that it has 12, slices on an event model, but I can plunk that in as a pattern in any solution. I can always do the sign up using that recipe and then tailor it. So yeah, but at the core, you always want to make sure that your concepts are something that you can elaborate on using those basic fundamental building blocks. And then that should give you a better insight into the amount of work needed to accomplish it. Yeah, no, thanks for joining, Dennis. Always good to have your input. Okay, in the example of Sven, welcome. Nice to see you. In the example of notating traditional systems, inserts are depicted in the blue command color. Is this hand wavy or strict? Will it be inevitably be through mapping traditional system will adopt EM? So I think this gets into, are we going to be looking at raw, small CRUD events to then work up to proper ones? It's not just inserts that should be blue commands. It should be anything that changes state. So from the CRUD perspective, that's an update, delete, or an insert. They should all be blue commands, right? They're changing what the state of the system is. And yeah, it's totally valid to do that. I mean, in terms of being strict, you can, event modeling is a notation. And like with anything, you can follow it strictly or not. You just have to measure whether that's helping or hurting you. Um, I think the goal of having a body of work around it is to always have a common baseline to re-ground ourselves. And so that's why we have these rules about blue boxes go to orange boxes go to green boxes, and green boxes populate screens or give things for processors to do. And then back to blue boxes from those. That allows people to start to understand. If I go to another company that I have never worked with, but they said they've been doing event modeling for 3 years, and I arrive there and I look at their event model, I know that I can use it, because if they've been doing event modeling, then they've generally followed those principles and that notation. So I can help them faster, at least. And the further you stray, the bigger the problem is going to be in terms of getting up to speed. And whether you've taken a lot of shortcuts, whether you weren't as explicit in some of those things. So again, it's just a notation. You can be thorough with it. You can cut corners, and your timelines and how quickly you can work in the project are going to be affected by how many of these compromises you made. And that's not just for you, that's for anything. I mean, if you're doing UML or any other notation, BPMN, if you choose to hide complexity in a description of one box, then that's going to have the same effect. So, well, folks, that was good. If you have, I think for the next one, if you have topic suggestions, let me know. We can work something out. If you want to work on your project together, then we can do that next time. Yeah. Yeah, there's a bit of issue with color blindness with the blue and green. So there's ways to add some other rounded corners or other geometric distinctions to allow colorblind people to do that. But yeah, for most, the color notation does make it easy to follow. Again, you can easily adopt the notation to have a variation in shape for those that are colorblind, or use a different color scheme that's more friendly to those. So, but anyway, thanks so much, everyone, and everyone that's listening on the recording. I'll see you next time in about a month. In the meantime, don't forget about the Slack channel. Look me up on LinkedIn or Twitter. Usually Twitter, I'm on there quite often. And if I forgot something, ping me on there. Remind me. I think I have to paste some prompts that I used for event modeling. So give me a shout out there. If it's on a notification on Twitter, I generally get back to you with an answer. So it's probably one of the best ways to do that. So, all right, guys, thank you. See you next time. Bye.